No, like pretend like we just pressed record. We're in the podcast now.
Yeah, I wasn't going to tell him that we were in the podcast, Matt. You just ruined it.
Wait, seriously?
I was just going to keep going and get his raw opinion.
Oh, are you
Oh,
recording this?
rude.
You're
Oh,
ridiculous.
you gotta give me a heads up.
I,
Oh,
I
I
thought
had no idea.
I thought we were aligned on that. But
Do I
anyway,
need to go change clothes?
No, you're fine. Don't change clothes.
All right, I'm on a podcast now.
now
You're on
he's
a
on.
podcast.
I've always been told I have the face for a podcast, so this is good.
It's a video
Um,
podcast.
oh, dear.
Welcome to the LeadrPulse Podcast. I'm Holly Tate, Chief Services Officer here at Leadr. That's a title update if you've been listening to us for any amount of time. I have had the joy and honor of serving as our Chief Marketing Officer, but as of December, I am now our Chief Services Officer, still leading the marketing team and love our wonderful marketing team here at Leadr. But as you might have heard, our manager training program, Leadr Academy, has taken off. We have found that organizations have a really big need to make their managers more effective leaders. And so I am now spending the majority of my time making sure that we are delivering Leadr Academy and other professional service lines that are coming soon with excellence to our Leadr clients. So that's what Chief Services Officer means. We're having so much fun helping make managers better leaders. But without further ado, I wanted to tell you about today's episode with Marie Myers, the Chief Financial Officer at Hewlett-Packard Enterprises. We had a wonderful time talking about Marie's hot takes, specifically about CFOs and executive teams. In today's episode, she talks about how you cannot be an effective CFO without being innovative. And what I love about Marie is she is so passionate about innovation and executive leadership. So take a listen. Now, I will say, I was very sick when we recorded this, but when Marie Myers says yes to a podcast with you, you show up. So my voice is a bit scratchy, but hang in there. Marie Myers has incredible takeaways and advice for us as leaders in today's episode of the LeadrPulse Podcast. Marie, I'm curious, let's start with that first one. One of the things that really stuck out to me in your bio was the fact that you are known to be a CFO who is strategic and visionary, that fuels innovation and performance, which I don't hear finance and innovation often in the same sentence. So I'm curious, how have you become known as that person, and why do you think it's important to have finance and innovation together?
Yeah, no. Well, first of all, thanks for the opportunity to be here. And it's a great question. You're spot on. Most CFOs don't typically have innovation in their sort of vocabulary right up front. But look, I would say today, I don't think you can be a CFO of a global company and not have a ways to support your business to grow and innovate. We're in a period of just phenomenal disruption. Some people would say we're in the fifth, industrial revolution, or maybe we've just come out of the fourth. But we're in an age where digital disruption is just moving so fast, and what goes along with that is innovation. So you've got to be able to figure out how to sort of do two things at once. And I like to say how you're going to manage the business, manage the cost, and at the same time take some of that proceeds and then fuel it back into innovation, which obviously drives growth and then drives the value of the company. Ultimately, the stock price and value for shareholders and all your stakeholders. So to me, it's a balancing act. And a CFO has a unique role because they can typically sort of manage that balance in the organization that many other folks can't. You think about it, your business leaders, they're probably completely they completely resonate with innovation and driving growth. You go talk to your typical sort of finance group, and they'll be typically focused on cost. And so you've got to be somewhere in the organization, the two, and the trade-offs between the two needs to come together. And I really think today that a CFO is well equipped, frankly, to play that role in a company.
So, what are some practical examples of how a CFO, or even if we're not a CFO, but business executives, can think about leveraging financials to spur innovation? Because on the one hand, I would think, I don't want my CFO to be super creative because I want them to make sure we're buttoned up and that we're not doing anything wrong or illegal, et cetera.
So what are some tangible examples of what that looks like to spur innovation using our financial models or strategic planning?
Yeah, no, first of all, the CFO's role is a fiduciary role, and I take that one, I might add, really seriously. But the area that comes to mind that is the most obvious is capital allocation. Like the CFO ultimately kind of gets a big stake in driving the capital allocation framework for the company. If that capital allocation framework is linked to driving growth and driving value, driving innovation, then, to me, that's the role that I think the CFO can really play. And that may be allocating, investment dollars that they've seen through inefficiencies in one part of the company, taking those investment dollars and then reallocating those dollars back to drive, for example, innovation. And I'll be honest, through the pandemic, I was fortunate enough to be in a situation as a CFO where we were driving phenomenal capital returns. And so I had the opportunity to really find key initiatives in the company that we could use to drive long-term growth. And then frankly, part of it was investing in the digital architecture of the organization. So, took some of those proceeds that we saw in the COVID pandemic and then reallocated that very quickly into transformation and digital assets that were able to really transform the company. So that's just one example. But I think being the steward of capital in the company is an enormous balancing act. And I think that's, to me, the opportunity that the CFO really has.
Well, listening to myself interviewing Marie is painful to my voice because that sounded awful. And here I am again, sounding nasally because I'm sick again.
Yeah, you sounded terrible. You sound way better now, but you still don't sound. You sound like you smoke a pack a day now, and you sounded like you smoked like 3 packs a day then. So, is there something you want to confess, Holly? Like, what's really going on?
No, I'm trying to give it up. Oh my gosh, it's brutal. No, that has been the most surprising thing, being a mom, having a baby, is how sick I am. But you have a baby and you're not nearly as sick as I am. So it must just be a me problem.
No, it's not. We were in Seattle last week for Thanksgiving, and Ada was sick, and I met someone and I was introducing Ada, and I said, "This is Ada, also known as my little snot bucket."
Yeah.
And this other mother that I was meeting said, "Sorry to break it to you, they're going to be a snot bucket for 15 years." And I was like, "Okay, thank you, good to know."
Yeah, this is the new normal. Oh, yeah.
Well, I cannot believe you got to meet Marie. That is crazy.
So it is just so neat. Her daughter was an intern at my co-working space, and
So cool.
as a part of her internship here at the co-working space, the owner of the co-working space had her go around and like meet with different women who work at the co-working space. And anyway, and so I just asked her at the end, I was like, "Hey, I would love to meet your mom. Would she be willing to be on our podcast?" And she's like, "Well, I'll ask her." And here we are. So
Oh, cool.
what a neat, she's just an incredible woman, and her bio is just amazing. And so, yeah, that's why I interviewed her as sick as I was, because I was like, I might not ever get this opportunity again.
Yeah. It's also refreshing to hear someone with a weird accent too. So I felt seen.
But the question is, whose accent is weirder, the New Zealander or the Australian?
Gotta be Australian. No offense, Marie. Gotta be Australian.
Oh, it's so funny. Okay, so one of the reasons why I wanted to interview Marie for our podcast is because anywhere where you see her bio or she's written a book and you read about the book, she talks about how innovation and finance have to go together. And that is not something that I've ever heard from anyone in finance, much less a CFO of a global company.
Yeah. Yeah, I think her statement, I wrote it down, I guess an abridged version is, you cannot be a CFO of a global company without being an innovator. I thought I would have expected much more of a defensive compliance posture in a role like that. I would have imagined the role at that level is don't get put in front of Congress, don't get lawsuits. Like I would have figured like that's the very top of the food chain. And she articulated like that is yes, that's critical, but it maybe is like table stakes. And she's saying actually it's about moving the business forward, not just ensuring that we don't go backwards. And I think that's a key difference.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess this is the hot take, is like, do you agree or disagree? Which I mean, we both are innovative people, so I don't think there's going to be a lot of disagreement here.
Would our CFO agree? So Brett's a good friend.
Yeah.
So I don't.
We should have brought Brett into this. All right, everybody. Today is going to be a little bit different because we have a special guest. Not only did we get to hear insights from Marie Myers, but we also have Brett Billman, the one and only our CFO here at Leadr. Welcome, Brett.
Thanks for the heads up.
My second favorite person on the executive team.
Okay.
That's the
Love to
right
hear it.
answer, because Garrett is number one. So
Yeah, right. Brett, we really wanted you to join because, well, I don't know if you're going to remember this, but when we first started talking, you said, do you know what it takes to be a good finance executive? And I said, what? And you said, when you ask a finance executive, what's 2 + 2? They should always answer,
What do you want it to be?
what do you want it to be?
That's right.
and
So-
that was the day that Brett got his offer letter.
That was the
Yes.
day he got his offer letter. And that's a little tongue in cheek because obviously I think what Marie said there was obviously important, that you've got a fiduciary responsibility where everything has to line up and be perfect. But can you talk about you joining Leadr and moving from a defense CFO to an offense CFO
Yeah,
and
for
everything
sure.
that entails?
Yeah, and I think as you look at a financial org, there's a lot of different roles, right? Bookkeeper, controller, VP of finance, and all of those roles below a CFO, really their goal is to make sure the reporting is tight and everything is in the debit column or the credit column and where it needs to be so that the C-suite executives can go and make decisions on that. If you're a CFO that has been controller, bookkeeper, and you try to step into that role and you think that your job is to simply bring the cold, hard data and numbers to the executive team, you're not going to add the value that you need to add. What you need to be able to do is take that information and then based on that, bring up, okay, how should we think about these decisions that we're making? One of the things that Marie just said that I liked a lot was the CFO is really in charge of capital allocation, or the way I say it is resource management. My job is to look at all the resources we have across the whole company, whether that's cash, people, hours, what do we have at our fingertips, and how should we make decisions going forward based on the resources we have?
100%. You've said to me multiple times, you don't need a director or a VP of finance. You need a CFO.
That's right.
You need someone that's thinking like that stewardship idea across the entire organization.
That's right.
Well, and I think what she said about one of the things I love the most about Marie is that she equates finance and innovation, which are not two things that I ever hear together. That you don't typically hear about your financial leader as someone who's innovative. However, she even talked about this, like potentially the 5th industrial revolution, where so much can be outsourced to technology. It's I don't want to say that it's easy, but it's more simple to outsource or use tech for bookkeeping or expense management, et cetera. But what robots can't yet replace is the strategic thinking and decision making that you just described, Brett. But I do want to kind of stick on this idea of being the financial executive and driving innovation. Do you agree or disagree with Marie that should be the function of the CFO, is to drive innovation?
I think we need to define innovation really fast, because when I first hear that, my initial response is like, oh, no, I'm not an innovator. I'm not an entrepreneur. Don't ask me to come up with the next huge idea of what our product should do, or AI. And so if you think of innovation like that, that is not my strength. And that's where I look to you guys who are really strong in that. What innovation can mean in the finance world, though, is, okay, here are our constraints. How do we get really, really creative based on these constraints that we have in the business? And so can this person that historically has done this role, can we try them pull them over here into this role to try something new? And that's where I look at it as the resource management as well. If I've got a constrained amount of resources, how can I get innovative within those resources? So it's not what can I go build? How can we go take on the world? And I'm going to galvanize everybody around me to go do that. But what it is okay, based on what I have at my fingertips, how can I maximize the output? And you might have just heard that and thought like, oh, that's really creepy and weird, and you're maximizing utilization of people. And that's not it. But there is an element of, okay, how can I go further with less?
Yeah, we were at a dinner on Sunday night, Brett, we were at a dinner on Sunday night, and I heard you tell the story of how when people used to come for you with ideas, you would say, "That's a great idea. Just do it for half the amount of money, please."
Yeah. When I had the opportunity to run the budget of a $30 million org. And what's really easy when you have that much money at your fingertips is people to come in and say, hey, I want to go do this. I want to go do this. Here's what it costs.
Yeah.
And if you're not careful, you can approve it because you have the cash in the bank. But instead, I got in this really big habit of like, you should absolutely go do that, but you can only spend half that cost. You don't really need it. And the other side to this coin is what I would tell them is constraints force creativity.
Yeah.
Yes.
If we just have a ton of money at our fingertips and we can go do everything, we could end up getting there. But you know what? We'd probably go through a lot of money or a lot of resources or a lot of people that we didn't necessarily need to use. It's almost more fun to try to see how far can I go on as little fuel in the tank as I have.
Yeah.
There's that book called The Beautiful Constraint, and it's all about that concept that that constraints fuel creativity.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate that you brought that up, because for people who are listening who might be like, oh, I'm not an innovator, I'm not an inventor, that doesn't mean that you're not creative. And so innovation is different than being an inventor. And
Yes.
so being able to, and I think that's what you do this really well, Brett, is here are our constraints. Now, what is possible within those?
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I mean, my hot take is I think that most operational leaders, and finance to me fits into that, of like an operational role, don't lead with creativity. And that's why my nickname for them is See No Nos.
Yeah.
Because, my experience sometimes has been that because I am an ideas person, and that I get like, no, or prove it, or, you don't have data to support that. And so I appreciate leaders like you who are more prone to hearing the idea or putting constraints on it, not saying no flat out,
Well, that's a two-way street too, because especially I'm talking the two other most innovative, galvanizing people on our executive team.
Yeah.
When I walk into the room, you don't look at me like, okay, I've got to convince Brett that we should spend this money. You look at me as somebody who's coming alongside you guys, helping you, and that only helps me feel like I'm freed up to think a little bit more creatively.
Yeah.
If you guys are coming in and saying, hey, we need to go take over the world, and we're going to spend all the money, I then pull back and retreat into the position of, I've got to protect the business. And then the three of us are at odds with each other, which does not make a good executive team.
Yeah.
How can we come in, put everything on the table together and look at the problem, the three of us looking at the problem and saying, okay, what can we do with these constraints? Instead of you guys coming in and feeling like, okay, I've got to convince Brett to loosen the purse strings so that we can go do this thing.
I almost want to take that one step further as we wrap up and say, if you're a CEO out there or you're working with CFOs and you're on the executive team, you have to empower your CFO partner to bring that voice to the table. So Brett, you and I actually had this one conversation. I don't know if you're going to remember this, where I was like, hey, if you're not going to speak up in the meeting, you're not coming to the meeting.
Oh yeah.
Do you mind sharing that real quick?
For sure. So we're in the executive meetings, and this is where we've gotten some of the language of CFO versus CXO.
Yeah.
Right. So I would come into the meetings with my CFO hat on, and if any conversation didn't align with finances, or if we were talking about like a go-to-market strategy or a new product, I would just check out of the meeting. Like, well, this isn't in my purview. I'm only here to talk finances, and so I'm not really needed here. And I wouldn't speak up much unless there was a budget conversation. And that's when you later on basically said, hey, if you're not going to contribute, then you don't need to be on the executive team.
And I think that's just encouragement to the CEOs out there. Like, draw that out of your CFOs. They have ideas, they have opinions, they just don't know where their lane starts and ends. And if you're a CFO out there, feel empowered to speak up with your CXO hat on, not just your CFO hat.
Yep.
Yes,
Exactly right.
that CXO piece. That was revolutionary for our executive team, for all of us. We
Yep.
were operating in that season more as a working group than a team. And so it wasn't just you, Brett, but that story is just so relevant to this episode with Marie. But for all of us to be thinking with our CXO hat on, whether it's go-to-market or finances or innovation, and doing what's best for the business to drive things forward. So, Well, thanks for joining us, Brett. Maybe you can
course.
join us again on a future episode. We
What
love
a
it.
nice surprise. Now you can get back to your day job.
Woohoo! I get to go back to
Go
Excel.
back to your spreadsheets.
All right.
Bye.
See y'all.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode with Marie Myers and a surprise guest, Brett Billman, our wonderful CFO here at Leadr. If you want to learn more about Leadr Academy, our manager training program, make sure you go to leadr.com/academy. That's leadr.com/academy. And when you go to our website, you can also sign up for LeadrPulse newsletter that goes out every Thursday with the latest updates from us here at Leadr. And we'll see you next time on the LeadrPulse Podcast.